What is going on, everybody? This is MYG Jeffy T 3285. I hope everybody had a fantastic rest of your Friday. And I'm just going to be doing a quick little video on the rundown of the SummerSlam card that's going to be happening tomorrow night, July 30th in Nashville, Tennessee. On the matches that are going to be on the card, which are 8 currently right now, who's going to be predicted to win each match, and if any surprises are going to be happening on the show. Now, we got a couple of women's matches that are going to be happening on the pay-per-view, including a Raw Women's and a SmackDown Women's title match. The first match I'm going to be previewing on the card is going to be Liv Morgan versus Ronda Rousey. Now, we all know how Liv Morgan was able to win the championship at Money in the Bank, as she was able to take advantage of a quote-unquote injured Ronda Rousey after she had her title match against Natalya, and Natalya was able to target her injured ankle and injured leg, and Liv Morgan was able to cash in her just won Money in the Bank briefcase that she won earlier in the night, and she was able to become the SmackDown Women's Champion. Liv Morgan has a whole lot to prove right now when it comes to becoming a very solid and believable champion going forward. And this is going to be a hard match for a lot of fans to think that Liv Morgan could realistically be able to go over somebody like Ronda Rousey in a 100% environment when Ronda Rousey is at 100%. But Liv Morgan has got to go out there and she's got to prove herself that she can hang with somebody like Ronda Rousey and be able to put on what we all think is a pretty good matchup and make it both believable enough where Liv Morgan is going to feel like she can be a long-term champion, a big-time player in this women's division. Now, going into this, I always thought that Ronda Rousey was going to be the clear favorite. I just don't know if Liv Morgan is going to be believable enough to win this match. I know the crowd is very much behind Liv Morgan. I think Liv Morgan should win this championship match, and I'm actually going to go that Liv Morgan is going to win this match, and she's even going to find a way to win the match clean. Or there's a possibility that Natalya, who's been sticking her nose a lot in the WWE SmackDown Women's title match, that she could obviously get interchanged in there and cause a DQ, which maybe could lead as well as to a championship match going to Clash of Champions on September 3rd. Or there's a possibility that Charlotte Flair, who has been rumored to be able to be returning back to SmackDown at any time, she can interchange into the matchup too, and there's a possibility we can also get a multi-women's title match at Clash of Champions too, with Charlotte interjected with Liv Morgan and Ronda Rousey. Now, what I think is going to happen is I think that Liv Morgan's going to end up beating Ronda Rousey, and I actually think it's going to end up being clean because I think WWE is going to want to try to find a way to establish Liv Morgan as a credible champion, and they're going to want to try to give her some credible wins on SmackDown and try to build that division around her. So I think Liv Morgan is going to win this match, maybe of nefarious means, but I think Liv Morgan is going to retain the SmackDown Women's Championship, and she's going to go on to Clash of Champions as the Women's Champion going forward. We'll have to see what's going to happen after that, and hopefully a pretty good matchup. Now, in terms of the Raw side of things, you got Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch. These two have been feuding pretty much for about a year. It's actually the feud started last year at SummerSlam, ironically, when Becky Lynch was able to make a return after she left the WWE when she was pregnant with her child. And then she made a return as a babyface at that pay-per-view and was able to beat Bianca Belair within seconds to become the Raw Women's Champion. And then we all seen what's happened over the program. Bianca and Becky have had themselves a little bit of a feud. Becky changed her character a little bit into what she is right now. Bianca Belair and Becky Lynch ended up having a phenomenal match at this past WrestleMania where Bianca Belair was able to knock off Becky Lynch and become the Raw Women's Champion. And since then, Becky Lynch has been having some feuds with the likes of Asuka, Alexa Bliss, and others, while Bianca Belair has been defending her title against some other women in the division at the time being, but we always knew that Becky and Bianca were eventually probably going to cross paths again. The build has been a little bit suspicious with this. I haven't loved the build-up with these two, as I think it's just been way too redundant. Too many matches on Raw and SmackDown. The build just does not feel very fresh with these two. But I think the match will actually end up delivering on SummerSlam. I think these two have great chemistry with one another. And I do think when all is said and done, Bianca Belair will still be the Raw Women's Champion in another great matchup at SummerSlam. As I think they're going to want to keep the belt on Bianca, try to make her look as strong as possible, and eventually down the line have her face off against Rhea Ripley at Clash of the Castle on September 3rd in about a month or so. So I think in terms of the women's divisions, I think both women are going to end up retaining their titles at SummerSlam. Now, a couple of the other matches on the card. We got Pat McAfee and Happy Corbin. These two have started feuding since around Money in the Bank when Pat McAfee decided to attack Happy Corbin for no reason. And the feud really started off after Madcap Moss and Baron Corbin ended up ending their feud when Madcap Moss was able to get a pinfall victory. And then, of course, Pat McAfee was talking trash to Baron Corbin at the time being. So Baron Corbin then, at the end of Money in the Bank, he snuck attack Pat McAfee when nobody was looking. And these two have pretty much been having a war of words, but it actually goes deeper than that. These two guys have known each other for a long time. They actually goes back to when they were both on the Indianapolis Colts as players at one point. When Baron Corbin was playing for the Colts as a practice squad player, and we all know Pat McAfee was a Pro Bowl player for the Colts as a punter at the time being. So these two are going to be able to hopefully work a pretty decent matchup. The build has been somewhat alright. Love Pat McAfee in terms of his character that he's being, and he's very underrated in the ring. Baron Corbin is what Baron Corbin is, but what he is that guy that can get under your skin, and he actually is a pretty good performer when it comes in the ring. So I'm thinking that these two guys are going to actually have a pretty decent matchup at SummerSlam. And just by the looks of things, there's no reason to think that Pat McAfee is not going to go over in this matchup. I think Baron Corbin is just there to try to make this match look believable and try to make this match look as good as possible and make Pat McAfee look as strong as possible. So I think Pat McAfee is going to end up going over in the end in this matchup. Now we go into the match for the United States Championship with Bobby Lashley and Austin Theory. These two guys have been feuding for the past couple of months as Austin Theory has been one of the young guys on this roster that was once picked by Vince McMahon as his hand-picked guy to become the next big superstar in this company. Austin Theory has been a rocket ship recently, rising up to the top of the card, and he was the United States Champion when he eventually took the title off of the likes of Finn Balor before, and he was carrying the championship for the past couple of months until Bobby Lashley was able to defeat him at Money in the Bank to become the new United States Champion. But Austin Theory also has the benefit of he was able to become the Money in the Bank winner towards the end of the night as he was able to be inserted into the men's Money in the Bank match earlier this month, and he is now holding the briefcase. So we all know what Austin Theory is looking for. He's looking to try to reclaim his United States Championship against Bobby Lashley and become not only a two-time United States Champion, but eventually maybe think about cashing in later in the night. I'll get to that later. And become a multi-time champion. So I think in the end, the only logical thing that makes sense here, you keep the title on Bobby Lashley. It just makes too much sense. You have Austin Theory and Bobby Lashley, which I think the two of them can have a pretty good match. Let these guys go in the ring. But I think ultimately, Bobby Lashley is going to end up holding on to that championship. So I think when all is said and done, Bobby Lashley will still be your United States Champion. And then Austin Theory has bigger goals in mind when it comes to, like, what he wants to do later on and what goals he actually really wants to achieve. Now I get to one of the most interesting matchups, but though one of the matchups that I'm not really as interested in, but I'm curious to see what happens, and that's The Miz versus Logan Paul. Now, we all know what Logan Paul is when it comes to his social media acclaim. This guy is a big-time social media mogul. A lot of people that are not affiliates of WWE are going to be interested in this matchup because of the name value that Logan Paul has. He's a big-time social media guy. He's been in boxing matches, MMA matches. He's one of the biggest social media moguls out there right now, and we all know what The Miz has done. He's a two-time WWE champion. He's a multi-time Intercontinental champion. He's a United States champion. He's been a tag team champion multiple times. He's won the Money in the Bank briefcase twice. So we all know what The Miz has done. But The Miz is really in this type of role now where he's sort of just like, he's more of a reality star now than anything. So this whole entire point of this match right now, I know they had a brawl recently. The feud has been lackluster in terms of the build-up right now. I will give credit where credit is due. Logan Paul actually was very impressive this past WrestleMania when he had his match along with The Miz when they tagged up against the Mysterios. I thought that was one of the better celebrity performances that were happening recently, as I thought Logan Paul actually did a pretty good job in his matchup, and he looked very good and serviceable. Probably one of the better celebrity performances I've seen. And he's obviously putting in the work to try to make sure he can put on a very good matchup. And I'm sure he'll do the best he can against The Miz. I actually think this match will not be as bad as many think. I won't think it's going to be that great, but I think Logan Paul can actually hold his own. The only thing that I just wonder is I think Logan Paul, in terms of his character, the way he comes off on TV, I think this guy is way more ideal as a heel than he is a babyface. I think a lot more people would rather just see The Miz. And The Miz is obviously one of those guys that is just, he's the ultimate heel. People just want to boo this guy, but I think when it all is said and done, people are just going to want to see The Miz punch Logan Paul in the face and beat him up. I think Logan Paul is just a much better heel than he is a face. And I think when it all said and done, obviously I think Logan Paul is going to go over in this matchup, but I think the best thing to do going forward is if Logan Paul wants to stay with the WWE long term, I know he signed a contract recently, he needs to go back to being a heel because I think he does best when he's generating heat. But in terms of the matchup, I think it'll be pretty decent, but overall, I do think that Logan Paul is going to end up going over The Miz. That just makes the most logical sense because usually the celebrity goes over the wrestler when it comes to these types of matchups. So I think Logan Paul will end up going over in this match. Now, in terms of the WWE Universal Tag Team Championship matches between the Usos and the Street Profits, I would say right now, this would be, other than the Raw Women's title match, this would have been the most exciting match on the card after what these two teams have done in terms of their promo work, which I think has been spectacular. Their matchup at Money in the Bank was absolutely fantastic. The problem I only have with this match is that it's just way too redundant. There's been too many one-on-one matchups on Raw and SmackDown. There's been too many mixed tag team matchups with these two teams. I think they just should have just gone with more promo work, more segments and stuff going on with these two teams. I think they did way too many matchups on Raw and SmackDown. It sort of killed the vibe between these two teams. I understand why they're doing the matchup. They had the controversial angle that happened when Montez Ford's arm was up on the 3 count, so they have that way to they have that out to make sure they can have this match at SummerSlam. And while I have no doubt in my mind these two teams are going to deliver an absolutely fantastic matchup at SummerSlam, because we just know the quality of work that these two teams can do, and they are the two best tag teams right now in the WWE when it comes to their in-ring abilities and probably when it comes to their mic work. I just think that my hype for this matchup is just a little bit reduced because of the fact that you've had these two teams wrestling against each other constantly in one-on-one matchups on Raw and SmackDown. But I do think this match is going to be great at SummerSlam. Besides the Raw Women's Championship, I think this is going to be one of the best matchup of the night. I think when it's all said and done, I'm actually going with the Street Profits to get that big win at SummerSlam and become the new Universal Tag Team Champions and get that big time moment at SummerSlam. I think that these guys are way overdue to become champions again. I know a lot of people are saying it doesn't make sense. Why would you just keep the titles on the Usos? You can have other teams, other face teams that can potentially win the tag team titles going forward. But I think the Street Profits are owed a championship. I think they're due for the championships, and I think ultimately the Street Profits will become the new WWE Universal Tag Team Champions when it's all said and done. Now we come to the no disqualification match between the Mysterios versus the Judgment Day, namely Finn Balor and Damian Priest. This feud has just had no steam, really. I think since Edge has left the group when he was ceremoniously kicked out earlier in June, the Judgment Day just seems like they've been floundering around all over the place. They have no momentum. I know they're trying to rebuild them back up right now with this feud against the Mysterios. We all know how talented Finn Balor is. We all know how talented that Damian Priest is. But I think this group has just been floundering around right now too much on TV. Even though they had some pretty strong segments as of recently, I think Triple H is going to do his best to try to build this group up, but I think they needed Edge in this group. And I thought it was ridiculous the fact that they kicked him out of the group way too soon because they want to have quote-unquote supernatural powers going on with this group, which made no sense at all. You had a perfect thing going with them in terms of the presentation, the look, the group as it was formed as a whole. And then you added Finn Balor, who could have been one of the missing pieces. I thought it was an idiotic decision to get rid of Edge at this point. I still think with it being a no disqualification match, I think the match will still be very good because the Mysterios are still a very good tag team overall. I love Finn Balor. I love Damian Priest in terms of their in-ring work. I think they're very good on the mic. And I think that Judgment Day needs to get the win here. And this whole storyline has been pretty much built around, is Dominic Mysterio going to eventually join the Judgment Day and turn on his father? That's been the whole storyline about this whole thing. And so far they've teased it, but they haven't gone through with it yet. I think that the turn actually is going to happen at SummerSlam, and that Dominic Mysterio is going to end up costing his father and his team the win, and he's going to end up turning on Rey and eventually joining the Judgment Day with Rhea Ripley, who just recently returned this past Monday night on Raw. Thankfully, I'm glad Rhea Ripley's feeling a lot better. He's going to join Ripley, Priest, and Balor to form what was going to be the new Judgment Day. And I think when it's all said and done, this is going to lead to eventually the return of the Rated R superstar Edge, either at SummerSlam or possibility of him returning on the Raw after SummerSlam. So I think ultimately the Judgment Day is going to get the victory because of Dominic Mysterio turning on his father at SummerSlam. Now I'm going to bring up a point of a match that was supposed to be at SummerSlam this coming tomorrow night, and that was going to be Seth Rollins versus Riddle. But obviously that match has been scrapped now because Matt Riddle has been quote-unquote injured this past Monday Night Raw with some injuries to his neck and his back. So Seth Rollins right now has no opponent, and right now he's not scheduled to be doing a match at SummerSlam. But there have been teases when he's went on a social media rant before saying like that he apologizes for not being able to be on the show tonight, and then Triple H recently reached out to him saying that, I hear you. So that's rumors speculating that maybe Seth Rollins is still going to have some type of matchup at SummerSlam with possibly a mystery opponent he's going to face at SummerSlam. And there's been a lot of rumors of people that he could potentially face, from the likes of Edge returning, maybe Cody Rhodes coming back, which I think is still going to be a little bit too early, possibly Randy Orton, or names that have not been in the WWE right now, or right now currently free agents, like a Johnny Gargano or Bray Wyatt. If you want to have a type of secret that's going to get the crowd energized, if you want to sell tickets, and if you want this WWE crowd to be very excited, you have to get somebody like a Johnny Gargano or a Bray Wyatt in this type of matchup with Seth Rollins, because you would generate a major buzz, because these two guys are big-time crowd favorites. And imagine the type of matchups you can have with a Bray Wyatt versus Seth Rollins, or especially a Johnny Gargano coming back and facing off against Seth Rollins. You're asking for a 5-star type match with Rollins and Gargano. So I think ultimately I'm going to make a pick, and I'm going to say Johnny Gargano, Johnny Wrestling, is going to make his return to WWE tomorrow night at SummerSlam, and he's going to end up facing off against Seth Rollins, is what should be an absolutely terrific matchup. Take it with a grain of salt. It might not happen, but I'm just going to put my prediction out there. I think Seth Rollins versus Johnny Gargano tomorrow night at SummerSlam, and Johnny Gargano is going to get a major victory, and it's going to be a nice homecoming return for Johnny Gargano at SummerSlam. So I think Gargano is going to be the one to return. He's going to defeat Seth Rollins. And now we're talking about the big match. The last man standing match. Last match between these two guys. Last time ever between Roman Reigns, the Tribal Chief, and Brock Lesnar, the Beast Incarnate. These two guys have had title matches after bruising matches all the way back since 2015. WrestleMania title matches, SummerSlam title matches, Survivor Series matches, Royal Rumble matches. Everything you could think of, these two guys have had matchups against each other. But it finally is going to all come to an end in this last man standing type of environment. And it's about time, because how many times can you run to the well of Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar? This series has to end. And this match, keep in mind, the WWE SummerSlam is supposed to be a TV-14 rated pay-per-view. So this should be a violent match with some blood implemented, weapons, brutality, everything you expect in a true last man standing match between your two biggest stars right now in the WWE with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. And you expect these two guys to deliver a big time matchup that should not go at least 5 minutes. It should go at least 10-15 minutes, maybe a little more, for your last match ever in terms of a last man standing match. And of course the wild card with this whole thing, like I mentioned earlier in the video, is Theory. And if he's going to be cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase and spoil the championship reign of either Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns, and possibly steal that title at the end of the night. I think that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar could put on a fantastic match if they're actually able to go for about 10-15 minutes, let these guys just beat the living hell out of each other, and put on a phenomenal, brutal violent match between these two and make it feel like a true last man standing match. So I think overall, I really believe that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar are going to have themselves a brutal matchup, and I'm actually going to be going with Roman Reigns to ultimately retain the Universal Championship over Brock Lesnar, because I think ultimately when it comes down to it, Brock Lesnar, this seems like his last hurrah with the WWE. I think he's ready soon to retire, go back to Saskatchewan and Canada, go back to hunting and fishing and just live out the rest of his life, just relax and stuff. I think Roman Reigns is going to have at least a little bit more of a title reign. They're going to give him that 700-plus day championship reign, and I think eventually he's going to be losing that championship to a recently number one contender in Drew McIntyre, where he's going to be able to win it at Clash of Champions in his home country on September 3rd. So I think eventually Roman Reigns he's going to win the title. He's going to retain tomorrow at SummerSlam, but I think ultimately Roman Reigns' 2+ year reign as champion is going to come to an end at Clash of Champions, and Drew McIntyre will become the champion over there. But I think this match should be good. I think Theory is not going to cash in yet. I think they're going to tease it. But I think Roman Reigns is eventually just going to go over, and they could tease some type of little interaction between Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns to end SummerSlam at the end of the night. So to recap my SummerSlam predictions, I have Logan Paul right now going over The Miz. I have Liv Morgan retaining the SmackDown Women's Championship over Ronda Rousey. I have Bobby Lashley retaining the United States Championship over Theory. I have Pat McAfee defeating Baron Corbin, a.k.a. Happy Corbin. I have the Judgment Day defeating the Mysterios. I have the Street Profits becoming the new Universal Tag Team Champions as they defeat the Usos, and their 300-day Tag Team Championship reign comes to an end. I have Bianca Belair retaining her Raw Women's Championship against Becky Lynch. And I have Roman Reigns, the Tribal Chief, finally vanquishing the Beast Incarnate, Brock Lesnar, for the WWE Universal Championship. So that's just my overall predictions for the SummerSlam pay-per-view that's going to be happening tomorrow night at SummerSlam in Nashville, Tennessee, 8 p.m., July 30th. So I would love to hear in the comment section what you think of the rundown of the card of SummerSlam, if you think it's going to be a very good card, an underrated SummerSlam matchup. And remember, this is Triple H's first pay-per-view that he's going to be running the creative, and this is to be the first time since 2007 where WWE is going to be under the TV14 rating and when it comes to their product. So leave a comment in the comment section on what matches you're looking forward to the most, your predictions for SummerSlam card overall, and who you think are going to be the best matches of the night, and what surprises you think that could happen at SummerSlam. As Triple H has teased, there could be some surprises we least expect at SummerSlam. Turn on the bell for notifications on the next WWE video or short that's going to drop. Hit the like button if you haven't already, if you like the video, and sub up if you haven't already to MYG Jeffy T 3285 for more breaking news, updates, and chatter surrounding the WWE, Brooklyn Nets, New York Giants, New York Mets, as well as food for thought. So I thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Have a great rest of your Friday evening. We'll see what happens at SummerSlam. I'm actually very excited for the pay-per-view. Have a great rest of your Friday night. Have a great weekend. Take it easy. And we'll see what the WWE has in store for us tomorrow night at SummerSlam. Have a great rest of your Friday night, everybody. Take it easy.